But on this day, the geyser is erratic.
So something strange is happening with Old Faithful, which is it's becoming less faithful. It's becoming less regular. Well, the reason it got its name is because over a certain period of time, you set your watch by it. A certain number of minutes, and it would go off. But now it's becoming less regular, harder to predict. And that means something's going on, something's changing.
The visitors have no idea that Old Faithful's unusual behavior is the first sign that the molten rock below the surface is building to something catastrophic.
There are certain places on the planet called hotspots where hot magma forms underneath the surface of the Earth and, in some cases, slowly comes out, occasionally explosively.
When magma rises through the crust and ends up meeting a large volume of subterranean water, well, what could happen is you flash that water to steam. And if that water's sitting inside rock, the steam has nowhere to go except to explode the rock. And that happens over an enormous area. You have an incredibly devastating explosion.
The most explosive of these events are known as super eruptions. Apart from Yellowstone, there are other hot spots around the world. Under Hawaii, off the coast of South America near Easter Island, in eastern Australia, and beneath Iceland. The first sensors register the magnitude 11 shock. And an alert goes out through the global seismographic network to scientists all over the world.
Our planet really has an EKG attached to it. And so if a magnitude 11 earthquake goes off, then worldwide, as those seismic waves hit the seismographs, scientists all over the world, and indeed citizens all over the world who are tuned into the internet, see that something very, very dramatic is happening.
A team of geologists in Japan waste no time in booking flights to the US. Their colleagues all over the world are doing the same. "12 miles away, Old Faithful is suddenly quiet. The famous geyser may never be seen again.
As the shockwave travels across Yellowstone, it's going to encounter the cavity where the reservoir of water is for Old Faithful, which is very vulnerable to something like a shockwave, and it would get crushed.
All that's left of the geyser is a wisp of steam.
Imagine dropping a concrete brick into a pond. There's the initial splash, but then there's also a whole series of ripples that come out. So after this hyper-eruption has exploded, the entire ground is just sending ripples out for hundreds of miles.
The deadly seismic wave races across the terrain, spreading destruction everywhere it touches. It advances toward Vancouver, Canada, 750 miles away from the eruption. At this distance, structures do not collapse, but the gondola on an aerial tram begins to swing on its cables as it travels between two mountains north of the city.
The shockwave and resonances set up by the shockwave will start to make this gondola swing harder and harder until eventually the cabling can come out of its seat. And if the towers are too far apart, then the gondola and the cable can plummet to the ground.
Journalists around the world pick up on the story.
I'm sure there would be people that think that one or both of these videos being so spectacular were hoaxes. But it doesn't take people long to realize that these two events are real and related.
Around the world, cities and countries more distant from the eruption are largely untouched by the destruction. People in places like Iceland, where volcanic eruptions happen regularly, pay special attention to the disaster. But otherwise, life there goes on as normal. For now. There's a better chance for survival close to the equator where the temperatures have dropped the least. In Venezuela, scientists from the nation's agriculture ministry quickly recognized the impact of the Ice Age. Tropical crops like sugar and bananas will no longer grow. The experts rush to obtain seeds of other plants that will thrive and produce food in the new colder conditions.
We will take grains that were specialized for northern climates, and we'll be growing some of that at the equator. So we'll be growing oats and rye down on the equator.
But these new seeds will only do so much. Santiago, Chile is abandoned. While many Chileans survived by fishing productive seas during the cold spell, the high temperatures now kill the ocean life.
During this hot phase, when the top of the ocean becomes warm, it becomes stagnant. And that means that it doesn't circulate, it loses all its nutrients, and basically, during this phase, the ocean becomes a desert.
But the warm climate now makes it possible for surviving humans to grow food again.